So, Dr. Denise Gosnell.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad that you caught me and brought me over here.
I'm glad that we could catch up with you. I was told that you have an interesting story, interesting background. So, first of all, before we get started, let's talk a little bit about PocketDoc.
Yeah.
So, what is that exactly?
PocketDoc is the operating system for health.
Okay.
We have built out a suite of JSON-based REST APIs that do any transaction in healthcare.
Okay.
And this was a long time endeavor for us, since building API-level connectivity across the data silos in healthcare was quite a mess, to say the least there.
Yeah.
But essentially, you can use our APIs throughout the entire life cycle of your healthcare process, checking your eligibility, filing your claim, claim status, paying. You could even, at the beginning of that cycle, schedule with your provider's scheduling system, or use our marketplace or an API to check the cash price of a certain service in a GeoZip area. We've got a whole sort of APIs for that type of those type of healthcare transactions.
Wow! And so you said as an API, so you have enterprises that are implementing this right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 3,000 plus companies who are using our APIs right now.
Nice.
My favorite example of a company using our APIs, it's a very niche application. There's an app you can download in the San Francisco area that it searches for the closest doctor that does dance therapy, but then also checks to see if your insurance is eligible for reimbursement with dance therapy.
Wow.
I feel like the probability of that is no. But no, that's an interesting app that is out that uses our networks.
Wow.
As well as Doctor on Demand. I don't know if you've heard of the telehealth and telemedicine movement, where instead of going into the brick and mortar store, you just have a video call online with a provider, and then they file a prescription or maybe recommend that you go to a specialist.
Okay.
So Doctor on Demand uses our APIs as well for eligibility claims, etc.
Yeah, well, and everyone knows healthcare is in terrible need of advancement when it comes to data and integration of their technology.
This is an interesting space because we are fighting two battles at the same time. Battle might be the wrong word when you talk about the graph database space. There's just a very vast landscape to navigate when it came to using a graph database for all of the data that we're observing. But on the healthcare side, creating connectivity across these insurance companies in between that and the provider and the customer, that was a massive problem that took us years to build out those APIs for connectivity.
Yeah.
Which they're free, by the way.
Wow. Okay.
We don't actually charge people for using our X12 transaction APIs.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, millions of is this just implemented in the U.S.?
Right now, yes.
Okay. So millions of Americans, I'm sure, appreciate that.
I think the developers appreciate it. We've got multiple languages in our documentation for using our APIs, and we're getting a lot of uptake on companies building apps on our platform. So that's why we consider ourselves the operating system for health.
Okay, that's awesome. So, speaking of graph data, we talked about it really briefly, but this is just such a great story. And so originally, when you were going to school, you weren't studying graph.
No, I was not. I came into this space through mathematics, much like we've been talking about at the conference, and I did my undergraduate in mathematics, emphasizing elliptic curve cryptography, got an NSF fellowship to do my master's, and my first semester in 2008, I was locked out of all of the required classes, abstract algebra, real analysis, etc.
Stalemate.
Yeah. And I was looking at the course offering, and the only thing open was this class called graph theory.
Yeah.
And to essentially show my lack of knowledge at that moment, I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to take this class where you study the theory of bar charts and pie diagrams. That's not going to be interesting. Well, lo and behold, I walked in on the first day, learned about modeling, data and exchange and nodes and edges, and my entire life was opened up to a whole new field, and I've made a career out of it.
Nice. And like we were saying earlier, I mean, this is way back before, because within the last year, I mean, graph is nearly a household name, or maybe that's pushing it.
If you're in the tech industry.
In the tech industry, definitely so. But what you were talking about, I mean, this is back like just when Hadoop was getting cutting its teeth,
Yeah, and I was down for the first few years of my graph theory career. I was down in the trenches working with Teresa Haynes, Zahet, Nimi, and Henning, doing really low-level graph theoretic proofs, looking at locating domination, total domination, just different graph invariants as the property of your graph structure is changing, and bounding and studying what that looks like from a theoretical perspective. At the end of that work, it was great to have some papers out, but I wanted to actually implement that in some applications, and that's why I switched over to doing a PhD in computer science. And that's where I started and went from that's where I transitioned from graph theory to graph algorithms. And during that, I did some NLP translation with my advisor, Dr. Michael Berry, and we implemented LSI in a social networking perspective to do social fingerprinting.
Okay.
And from that, I transitioned to PocketDoc to help them stand up and do all their graph analytics in a graph database in an OLTP manner, and then use all my analytical and theoretical background to do some really cool applications with bringing transparency to data in healthcare.
Wow, that's a great cause. And then in PocketDoc, how long has PocketDoc been around?
We've been around since 2011.
Okay.
And right now we're through our Series B.
Okay. Series
B fundraising, over 40 million raised to date. So it's a great time to be both in healthcare and the graph analytics space.
Yeah.
So we're hitting both of those waves at the same time.
Yeah, and I love that connection. When you look at the applications of graph data, the idea that it can be used to map these complex relationships. There's not really another good way to look at it, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's the real key that we saw to unlocking your data in healthcare. Think about what it's like for you when you go to the doctor. I don't know about you, but before I really got involved in healthcare, I would go to the doctor and wait for the bill. Please tell me what other industry people shop and then say, oh, I'll pay for it later, just tell me how much it costs.
Yeah.
And that's really where our CTO, Ted Tanner, really envisioned that really bringing transparency to this industry is going to be representing the data as an underlying graph model, where your main entities are your consumer, your doctor, your insurance company, the service you receive, flu shot, knee surgery, et cetera, and really that transaction. And those interactions between any of those entities really is where the data transparency lies. Representing it as a graph, we're counting paths. We're counting paths between consumers who received a certain service at a doctor. Let's just count how many times that happened, look how much things cost, and the actual analytics becomes much simpler once you get that graph representation built.
Yeah, and so with the Series B, I'm sure huge growth. You guys hiring a lot of new data scientists?
Yeah, the Series B happened a few months ago, so we just went through a massive growth. I started at the company and we had maybe 13 people in our office. Mind you, we have two offices. One is in San Mateo in the Valley and the other's in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay.
All of our engineers are in Charleston, South Carolina. And when I started, we were 12 people in Charleston.
Yep.
And since then, we outgrew that office so quickly where everyone was sitting on top of each other, and now we're up to 70 people across our startup.
Wow.
So it was very quick growth.
Yeah, a lot of brain power probably in this tiny little space.
Yes.
It's probably hard to keep cool in there too.
Yeah, the data science team is this group of just completely brilliant individuals, each of which bring their own separate piece of knowledge to the table to help solve this problem. It's a challenging group to work with, but we really challenge each other every day, and I love it.
Yeah.
We've got your abstract topologist, you've got your logical mathematician, a graph theorist, and different types of people at this table. So
that's incredible. And we're talking about graph data. Stepping back a bit, we're hearing so much like in the last 12 months or so about graph data analysis and reporting and all these things. Like, why in the last year has there, in your opinion, have we seen this sort of growth and sort of just?
That's a really great question.
Yeah.
I think in the past year you've seen a huge uptake in the need to have graph databases become a more mainstream approach to data analysis. You've seen that need because up until now everyone's been cramming their problem into SQL. And that is not necessarily the right model to get the data analysis you need. I've been talking with people hearing horror stories about recursive joins to get out the analytics they needed. Whereas you could have another approach where you model the data in a database as it really represents the real world constructs and do your analytics from there. And now we're talking about doing point-based analytics or point-based recommendations where you're walking from your data to another data source. And to the problem domain, it just makes much more sense.
Yeah.
So up until now, people have been cramming something, cramming a square peg into a round hole.
Right.
And I think everyone's starting to see the real need for bringing up this technology.
And do you think the infrastructure advancements, the technology infrastructure has helped push it up as well?
Yeah, I think we are, both sides of the problem are currently motivating each other and challenging the other to keep up. So you have the infrastructure needs, but at the same time you also have your community needing to move their analytics into other more graph model domains. And as you're getting uptake in both, you're seeing growth in both. And from an infrastructure perspective, we've gotten so far with our infrastructure and needed to make a switch to go a little further. And that switch is now capable because the community is starting to drive the need for more database models, better infrastructure, et cetera. So I see it more as a yin and a yang. They're both motivating each other, and as we're getting growth on both, you're going to see, as Lynn said, really this is going to be the year of the graph. Yeah,
and you're not seeing a saturation point for people who are looking to graduate with PhDs in graph theory or anything like that.
No, not yet. And I hope I do a lot of mentoring work when I have the time, and like we were talking earlier, I went back to Dr. Teresa Haynes and wanted to speak with her students at the university where I studied for my master's, really trying to motivate students that there's going to be a huge need. They always talk about the number of programmers that are graduating and number of jobs, and this is going to be even worse when you're talking about graph theorists and people who are building graph algorithms and graph DBs for those types of jobs. That's a whole other subset within that problem. And hopefully we can get that pipeline a little bit wider to get more students through the programs.
Yeah. Well, Denise, it's very fascinating, and I'm glad you took time to talk to us about graph. And are you going to be speaking at any? Yeah,
I'm representing PocketDoc today and speaking at 4 o'clock. And 50 minutes is a long time to talk about healthcare, so I'm gonna give a quick lightning talk, essentially, of 5 major projects, all graph related, that we're doing at PocketDoc, all of which have been open sourced, or we do have plans to open source to give back to the graph community. Because that's when I talk about the ebb and flow of getting both communities up. Really, one of the biggest challenges right now with those who are building graph databases and graph analytics is continuing to provide new resources and new tricks to the community to continue to let it grow, so that there's less of a ramp up when you're coming into the community. So contributing to open source is a huge component of what we do every day. So I'm going to go through 5 lightning talks of stuff that we've built that we're giving back. And I'm really looking forward to having been able to talk at the inaugural Graph Day. So I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, me as well. And if we can, we're going to go in and maybe capture a little bit of that talk. And again, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah, thanks.